Good morning, class. We have finished off our endocrinology system. Now we will quickly cover up the hematology section, and we'll start with sickle cell disease because it's a very important topic, and basically it's a childhood disease which can even proceed in adulthood, and it's very prevalent in Indian scenario. It's a very important and clinically also it's a very important topic. I hope everything is with the audibility and the slide transparency is good. You are able to see it and you are able to hear my voice. It's a small topic, but it's a very important topic, and a part of it you must have read and must have been lectured in pathology. So what is sickle cell disease? It's a group of inherited red blood cell disorder. Actually the healthy RBCs are round and they move through small blood vessels carrying oxygen to all parts of the body, which is basically just carried on in form of or rather affiliated to hemoglobin. And in sickle cell disease the RBC become hard and sticky and assume a C-shaped forms, which is called a sickle, like the sickle which is used in agriculture by the agricultural people. The oxygen is carried by hemoglobin molecules, and these hemoglobin are formed in different forms. Normally in a normal individual, hemoglobin A, which is HbA, is present in 95 to 98%, and HbA2 is another form of hemoglobin which is formed in around 2.5%, and there is no HbS or HbC, and this is a very important hemoglobin, fetal hemoglobin, which is present in the infants up to 6 months of age, and it might be present in a normal population in less than 1%. So the normal hemoglobin constitutes HbA, which is the normal hemoglobin, in 95 to 98% cases, and this is what happens in like in sickle cell trait, which is a heterozygous condition where you have HbS can be in the range of 35 to 45, and HbA will be around the range of 50 to 60, and HbA2 maybe up to 3.5, and there may be enhanced HbF as a protective action of the body, and especially in the sickle cell anemia, which we're going to talk about, usually the HbS hemoglobin is very high, up to the percentage of to 95%, and HbA2 is almost nil, and HbF might be very high, and the sickle cell entity can coexist with other hemoglobinopathies like HbC and thalassemia, and even with thalassemia minor. They all have a different variation in the hemoglobin levels. What is important is that usually in the sickle cell anemia you can have almost up to 4 types of hemoglobin variants. So the hemoglobin is basically of 4 subunits called globulins, and this globins basically has 2 alpha and 2 beta globin chain, and these basically is the site for oxygen binding, which is associated with the heme prosthetic, which is present on the inner side of the molecule, and they are basically the site of the oxygen binding, and it form a 4D quaternary structure where this alpha and the beta chains, they move related to one another, and they are responsible for the binding and the release of the oxygen in the blood. So usually the hemoglobin remains soluble when they are a very high concentration of the oxygen with a normal oxygen binding and releasing properties, and The distribution of amino acids genes are such on these globulins that just beta globin and the alpha globin, the hydrophobic residue is basically on the interior core, as I talked about, and the hydrophilic residue dominates the water exposed surface of the globin fold. And that heme prosthetic grooves, the iron is being uh, attached to the globin molecule, and that is insert into a hydrophobic pocket formed by the globulin. Then the structure of hemoglobin. Uh, this is basically the structure of hemoglobin. This is a beta chain and this is alpha chain, and this is ferritin and the heme, the prosthetic, which is present on the inner hydrophobic side of the globulin chain or the globulin fold, which you can see. So what happens in sickle cell disease? There is basically a sickle cell anemia. There is a single nucleotide alteration, or which is a point mutation in the beta globin gene of the hemoglobin, and it causes change of basically valine instead of glutamic acid. So the valine instead of glutamic acid on the 6th position of the beta globin molecule, and so the charge at the site is altered, and this allows for the polymerization of hemoglobin under the condition of hypoxia. So the repeated hypoxia can lead to polymerization of hemoglobin, and that is the reason for the stickiness and the for the robustness of the sickled RBCs, because of the polymerization of the hemoglobin under the hypoxic condition, and which is reversible basically. And if the episodes of hypoxia continues, then that leads to irreversible polymerization of the hemoglobin in the form of sickling. So this is the normal RBCs, and this is a sickle cell RBCs, and as the sickle cell RBCs, especially on the ramifications of the blood vessels, where this is less these sickle cells RBCs are less deformable, they are more resistant and more sticky, and they are that's why prone to destruction under the hypoxic condition, and especially they form the microvascular occlusions and destruction by the spleens, and that is extravascular hemolysis. And out here this picture shows how these rigid sickle cells occludes the small vessels on the ramification sites, because they are less deformable and less friable and less prone to intravascular hemolysis. So they are basically responsible for the microvascular occlusions. So what I said, as I said, this induction of sickling is in susceptible erythrocytes requires oxygen tension less than 40 millimeter. That is hypoxia, which is less than 40 millimeter mercury, and for around 2 to 4 minutes. And this repeated deoxygenation of the hemoglobin S leads to polymerization of these insoluble hemoglobin strands. So initially the polymerization may be incomplete and reversible if the reoxygenation occurs early in the process, but if the repeated exposure and there is an episode of alternating deoxygenated and oxygenated states, that can lead to membrane distortion, oxidative damage, and irreversible sickling. So this is the diagram where you can see this is normal RBCs, and this is the sickle RBCs in the deoxy states. So basically a very important part of a sickle cell disease, we know that this is an autosomal recessive disorder, which is basically a homozygous recessive disorder. So it has every individual who inherits the two abnormal genes, one from each parent, and that will basically code for synthesis of the beta chain of the hemoglobin molecules. As you can see, this diagram where we have seen this in a heterozygote and this is again an heterozygote, which have one normal and one sickle cell. This is the normal, and the dark shade is the sickle cell trait, and there is a normal again, another normal male. The dark one is the sickle cell, and the lighter one is the normal allele. And once there is and as you see this pedigree chart, you can see the progeny. There is a chances of in the progeny sickle cell trait can be up to 50%, and a sickle cell disease up to 25%. But there's no hard and fast maths which works in cases of inheritance. But this is the a very roundabout inheritance predisposition which I am trying to show you. Usually individuals with sickle cell traits, they do not show clinical symptoms, and we will talk about the traits later. The highest frequency of sickle cell disease is found in the tropical regions, especially in the sub-Saharan African countries, India and the Middle East. And in prevalence can be up to 9.5 to 22.2%, especially in the malarial endemic areas. The sickle cell disease is more prominent because it has a very ambiguous role as a protection for milder cases of malaria, and in the severe cases of malaria it is still more severe, the patient with sickle cell disease. So it has a certain protective, which we will see in the next few slides, how it has a protective mechanism for malaria, especially in the malarial areas. And that's why these diseases have been recognized in malarial areas of the world, and they have especially the heterozygotes have a selective advantage in the malarial areas. And with sickle cell traits usually have lower level of Plasmodium falciparum parasitemia and higher hemoglobin count and less severe reinfections than the individual with homozygous HPA types. And the reason behind it is how the sickle cell protect against malaria, because it makes it's much more difficult for the parasite to metabolize or enter the sickle cells, and it accelerates sickling. Parasitized cells are quickly removed through the extra vascular hemolysis, while the children with sickle cell trait seem to have a milder form of falciparum, but still a normal sickle cell disease have a very severe form, which is associated with a very high mortality rate. That's why I said it's an ambiguous sickle cell protective action on the malarial malarial parasites. So this is why sickle cell is more prevalent in malarial endemic areas, and it has definitely protective action against malarial infection, not against the severe malarial infection, but as we talked about the most important factors affecting the sickling of RBCs is a decreased oxygen tension. As a result, can be result of a high altitude or flying in a non-pressurized plane, or if there is any decreased pH or acidosis, or any increase PCO2, or any increase in viscosity of the blood, or any increase in concentration of 2,3 biphosphorylates. And with the consequences of sickling is, with the sickling there will be reduced lifespan of the RBCs. The normal RBC's lifespan is around 100 to 120 days, which can be reduced to 15 to 20 days in cases of sickling. And it frequently blocks the flow of blood in the narrow capillaries and the vessels, and so the interruption in the supply of oxygen will lead to anoxia, severe pain, and eventually the death of the cell, which is called infarction, in the vicinity of the blockage. And because of the disruption of the RBC membranes and increased adhesiveness of the sickle cell reticulocytes, which are increased because of the hemolytic extravascular hemolysis, there will be increased reticulocyte action, and there is increase in reticulocyte numbers that again there will lead to increased adhesiveness of the sickle reticulocytes, and there will be again an increase in leukocyte count too, and it is a state of a thrombotic coagulopathy, which is often associated with sickle cell anemia, and it invariably contributes to the severity of the disease. I think you understood this whole process. So the clinical manifestation is basically the result of the basic pathology which have been illustrated in the previous slides. So sickle cell disease, the most common presenting symptoms involves pain and anemia. Usually sickle cell disease manifests early in childhood. For the first 6 months of life, infants are protected largely because of the elevated level of fetal hemoglobin, which is fetal hemoglobin has a protective action against the sickling. It has a more oxygen carrying capacity, and it has some even anti-neutrophilic action, and that's why in early infants in early 6 months they are protected largely because of the elevated level of HbF. And once this disease starts, it is associated with the growth retardation, delayed sexual maturation, and underweight. Anemia is universally present, and there is it's a chronic and hemolytic in nature, and it may be complicated by the megaloblastic changes secondary to folate deficiency too. So as the hemolytic anemia proceeds, there will be a typical baseline hemoglobin can be to the level of 6 to 9 gram per deciliter. There can be acute aplastic anemia, which is a parvovirus B12 mediated infection, and that can trigger acute severe exacerbation of anemia. There can be splenic enlargement early in the childhood and fibrosis. And later on, what happens is, talking about the splenic enlargement, the first reaction of the spleen because of the extravascular hemolysis or engulfment of the sickled RBCs, there will be the basic responses. Early response is the splenic enlargement, which later on, because of the repeated infarction and ischemia of the spleen, lead to autosplenectomy, where is a fibrosis of the spleen on the later stage of the sickle cell disease. In the arthropathy, you will have osteomyelitis or osteonecrosis. Up to 50% of the adult will suffer from osteonecrosis, and dactylitis, which is also hand or foot syndrome, which is an early onset of a marker of a disease severity, and this is all because of the action of those microvascular thrombosis and ischemia and infarction of the bones, which leading to painful state, and it will be accompanied with fever too. And there will be a non-healing leg ulcers, usually on the medial malleolar side, up to the 20% cases of SS sickle cell disease. Neurological manifestation, usually the painful crisis can be present in 70% of the cases. There has been episode of stroke and CVA, especially in children, and that has been a reason for 20% of the death because of the microvascular coagulation, obstruction, and ischemia and the infection. Has been the basic pathology, and there has been retinopathy from early retinopathic changes to the proliferative retinopathy to the retinal detachment can be present in up to 50% of the sickle cell disease, and especially the sickle cell C adults, which is much more lesser in cases of SS homozygotes. Chronic pain syndrome or a chronic neurological manifestation can be present in the small subsets of patients. Pulmonary manifestations are in the form of acute chest syndrome, which simulate conditions of pneumonia and pulmonary embolism, where you have severe chest pain along with fever and tachypnea can be there. Oxygen saturation might be low. Patient might undergo desaturation, and it is responsible for mortality of up to 1.1% in children and higher for adults. There can be a restrictive lung disease. It can manifest into restrictive lung disease over a period of time in 10 to 15% of the patients. Immunological dysfunction is because of, as I talked about, the autosplenectomy. There can be increased susceptibility to infections, and through erythrocyte aluminization, there can because of the increased incidences of transfusion or hemolytic transfusion reaction. So such patients are basically properly vaccinated against pneumococcal and the other Neisseria and other infections, because they are very prone to infection because their spleen are basically fibrosed. Then genital urinary syndrome, you can have a chronic renal insufficiency, and it can be lead to chronic renal failure in 5 to 20% of the adults, and it is a very most common cause for isolated asymptomatic hematuria in adults. And there is one particular term which is called isothenuria, where there is inability to dilute or concentrate your urine because of a repeated infarction and ischemia on the renal vasculature, especially the papillary necrosis takes place, and that can lead to hematuria as well as renal insufficiency. Priapism is again a painful erection, and that is again due to that can repeated priapism or repeated vasoocclusion of the penile arteries can lead to impotence, especially in 10 to 40% of the men. Cholelithiasis or gallbladder stone and viral hepatitis from transfusion, or even not pathological jaundice can be present in up to 10% of the adults, and 70% of the adults may manifest as with cholelithiasis, and liver failure is present in up to 2% of the cases. Defective urine concentration ability in sickle cell, I talked about isothenuria because of the low oxygen saturation of the renal medulla, which are very prone to any alteration in the oxygen saturation, and that favors polymerization of the vessels of the renal of the RBCs in the renal vessels. And as the hemoglobin polymerizes, so it is basically it's correlated with the inversely with the urine concentration ability. Very important fact is alpha thalassemia reduces percentage of hemoglobin sickle cell percentage and polymerization potential. Clinical features. A very important thing about sickle cell disease, it is basically is variability in its clinical presentation. It is clinical heterozygosity, which is very common in sickle cell disease, which can manifest as early in childhood, and patient by the end of his early 20s, patient may be indisposed, or the patient, the mortality is very high in the cases of sickle cell disease, and there is so much variation that patient. There are certain cases of sickle cell disease who have live up to 50 or 50 or 55 years of age, and they might have been asymptomatic very early on in their life, and the period of sickle cell crisis have been very less in such patients. So there is a variability or clinically heterozygosity on manifestation as far as manifestation is concerned, and usually it's a chronic and a hemolytic nature of this anemia, and the patient hemoglobin level can be up to 6 to 7, and still the patient who are able to participate in the activities of daily life in a normal fashion are very uncommon, and their tolerance for exercise and exertions are very limited, and that's why mostly these patients they have those are plastic crisis complications are very high, and they tend to not live a very for a very long period of time. Spleen enlarges as a later part of the first year, and because there might be a sudden painful enlargement due to large number of sickle cells, which is called splenic sequestration crisis. And as I said, as the fibrosis ensues, there will be a non-functional spleen, or rather a redundant spleen, which will be a major contributor to the immune deficiency existing in these individuals. And the other problem, especially in infancy, early childhood, is dactylitis, which present as a painful swelling of the dorsum of the hand and foot. Importantly, this dactylitis have to be differentiated from the hand foot mouth syndrome, where you have fever and rashes as a predominant features. Then acute chest syndrome will consist of, as I talked about, the typical chest pain, severe tachypnea, and leukocytosis and pulmonary infiltrates. And it's a medical emergency and must be treated immediately. There are, because it's a thrombotic coagulopathic state, there are incidents of fat embolism as well as bone marrow infarction, and it's a very important pathogenesis of this syndrome. And if the acute chest syndrome is not attended promptly, it may lead to ARDS. So usually a patient undergoing several sickle cell crises, they are more prone to early mortality, and the conditions which causes or predisposes to sickle cell crisis are infection, repeated infection, low oxygen tensions, concomitant medical conditions, any dehydration that's very important, leading to hyperviscosity or more chances of sickle cell adhesion and microvascular coagulation, any conditions of acidosis or extreme physical exercise, physical or even psychological stress, or alcohol-induced dehydration, and even in pregnancy and cold weather is supposed to be factors which can trigger a sickle cell crisis. So the measure for preventing crisis in patient with sickle cell disease, obviously consuming adequate amount of fluid to prevent dehydration, especially during febrile periods and hot weather, avoiding exposure to extreme colds and extreme exercises, and usually even using drugs that can lead to acidosis like acetazolamide, avoiding mountain climbing or air flights in an unpressurized cabin is extremely prohibited, avoiding hypoxemia in the perioperative period when the general anesthesia is induced, or even when a procedure involves hypertonic radiographic dyes introduction. Diagnosis is through the laboratory findings. You will have a complete blood cell count. Usually you might find the increased reticulocyte count, which is a feature of a hemolytic anemia, maybe in the range of 5 to 15%. Total leukocyte count may be on an upper limit of a normal or greater, maybe up to a range of 20,000 in absence of of any infection. Then MCV will be normal. Hemoglobin, as I talked about, there will be mild to moderate anemia. Hematocrit will be less. Platelet count might be normal to decrease or to increase. Blood smear or peripheral smear, you will see presence of target cells, poikilocytes, hyperchromasia, sickle cell cells, nucleated RBCs, and Howell-Jolly bodies. Then you have something called sickle cell solubility test, where using a sodium thiocyanate, and that can also be done. The diagnosis of choice the investigation of choice is hemoglobin electrophoresis, looking for the uh, types of globulin present through the electrophoresis. And then there's something called high pressure liquid chromatography, which is HPLC. Bone marrow, you don't need to get a bone marrow aspiration for the diagnosis of such patient, because usually the bone marrow will have a markedly hyperplastic or activity with erythroid predominance. Radiological features, especially in sickle cell disease, will be a mild expansion of the marrow cavities, osteoporosis, or increase you will possible sclerosis of the long bones and femoral heads due to the repeated infarction, or liver function test can be associated with increase in abnormal liver function tests, or increase in serum creatinine level as a sequelae to renal failure. So basically, sickle cell disease, the manifestation in sickle cell disease is because of the vaso-occlusions, and that can usually be present on major organs, kidneys, pulmonary, and what we have missed out is cardiac, where you can have the major coronary vessel obstruction can lead into even cases of MI has been noted in cases of sickle cell disease. And there can be microvascular infarctions or ischemia, which can lead into dilated cardiomyopathy with reduced cardiac functions. So it can basically lead any major organ dysfunction over a period of time. So treatment strategies, it encompasses 7 goals. Management of vaso-occlusive crisis, which is an emergency. Management of chronic pain syndrome, especially the bony pain. Management of chronic hemolytic anemia. Prevention and treatment of infection. Management of complications and various organ damage syndrome which is associated with the disease. Then prevention of stroke and detection and treatment of pulmonary hypertension, which can be a later manifestation of sickle cell disease through the obstruction or of the pulmonary vasculature, leading on to pulmonary hypertension or a core pulmonary. Usually the vaso-occlusive crisis will have a severe onset of pain, and usually triggers pain began as early as 6 months of age, and 1/3 had experienced the pain by the age of 1 year, and over 90% by the age of 6 years. The triggers is cold, wind, low humidity, stress, alcohol, menses, and you usually don't have the objective diagnostic test as a clinical diagnosis. And primary management is a assessment and administration of appropriate analgesia, and usually for mild to moderate you look for NSAIDs when they are not contraindicated, and for a more severe you can use opioids, and hydration and the other non-pharmacological therapies like maintaining normal body temperature will be very useful in such cases. And then you have acute chest syndrome, where again fever and signs of middle lobe lung involvement, and in adults are often afebrile, but they have it's a very painful and condition. And again, once that you diagnose acute chest syndrome, early intervention with antibiotic therapy and hospitalization, and the actually use of simple transfusion or whole blood transfusion have been used with various unpredictable results. While for moderate or severe ACS, we usually use exchange transfusion, which have shown enormous results. Or again, we have to maintain the hydration and analgesia. And for hepatobiliary tract complications, basically it's a very common in person with sickle cell disease, and most of the importantly, it is mostly due to the cholelithiasis or the gallstone, which may be present in which may manifest in acute cholecystitis, and usually they are asymptomatic, and usual management is watchful waiting or then or removal of the gallstone if it's very incapacitating. Priapism is again which are the irreversible changes occurring in the leading to erectile dysfunction in the penile vasculature, and again aggressive oral or intravenous hydration or intravenous analgesia is for any episodes of priapism lasting 4 hours, and get a consultation from the urologist, and you can even try exchange transfusion for cases of priapism which are refractory to aspiration. This aspiration of blood can be drawn from the corpus cavernosum for individuals with sickle cell disease. These have been trial and tested methods, but their efficacy is still not very predictable. Aplastic crisis, there is when acute drop in hemoglobin level or markedly reduced number of reticulocytes in peripheral blood usually happens in children with infection with human parvovirus B9, and other reported cases of transient aplasia has been seen in cases of streptococcus pneumonia, salmonella, and Epstein-Barr virus, and this can result in a rapid and life-threatening drop in hemoglobin level, so it can be managed with transfusion. And splenic cystogen crisis, where a large volume of total bilirubin can become sequestrated in the spleen and leading to hypovolemic shock, and that can be a cause of death. So it presents with rapidly enlarging spleen, markedly decreasing hemoglobin level, and persistent reticulocytosis. So such patients might need a splenectomy, usually, and is often used after the first acute event to prevent recurrence. So basically, treatment is vaso-occlusive crisis is treated with vigorous hydration and analgesia. Pain control is through the administration of NSAIDs or opioids. Prevention of infection is very important through vaccination for the Haemophilus and pneumococcal. Allogenic bone marrow transplantation is curative for this disease, but it's very difficult to decide which patient should be offered BMT. And there is something called hydroxyurea therapy, which increases hemoglobin, fetal hemoglobin, which decreases WBC or chances of sickling and the addition in the sickle cell RBCs, and retards gelation and polymerization. So hydroxyurea can be used as a chronic therapy. Blood transfusion is indicated only in specific situation, and surgical case is limited to treat disease complication. So prevention of sickle cell disease is through the screening. Prenatal diagnosis is available, and there are several laboratory procedures which can be employed for prenatal testing, and it should be accompanied with genetic and psychological counseling. Prognosis, I said, it's a lifelong disease, and prognosis is very guarded and it's variable. Clinically heterozygote manifestation is variable, and goal is to achieve a normal lifespan with minimal morbidity, and as the therapy improves, the prognosis also improves. Sickle cell traits is again HBS heterozygotes. They have a minimal clinical problems, and overall life expectancy is similar to normal individuals, and these patients may develop sickle cell crisis if they become very severely hypoxic, and they may have severe episodes, recurrent episodes of pale-based hematuria due to impaired ability to form concentrated urine, but these individuals are usually not placed at a very high risk. Then there is something called sickle beta thalassemia, which is especially encountered in Mediterranean countries, where you have congenital hemolytic anemia of severity and accompanied by splenomegaly, and the beta 0 thalassemia have a vaso-occlusive manifestation compared to homozygous sickle cell disease, and beta plus thalassemia less severe anemia and a fewer brain crisis and less organ damage. Sickle C disease, again, HB electrophoresis revealing 50% HbS and 50% HbC, and this HbC there is a defect in the 6th position in beta chain, which is replaced by lysine in place of glutamic acid. These increased tendency for sickle cells, SC cells, to sickle as compared to sickle cell traits, but not as much as sickle cell disease. And there can be occasional painful crisis and organ infects and high rates of complication during pregnancy. So this is basically a diagrammatic presentation showing the complication happening in sickling of in sickle cell disease. Because of the sickling of the RBCs, there will be a rapid destruction of sickle cells, that is hemolytic anemia, leading to overactivity of bone marrow, increase in the amount of bone marrow, and skull deformities can be present in chronic cases. And then you can have weakness and fatiguability because of the anemia, impaired chronic mental cognitive functions, poor physical development and growth, and they can lead to dilatation of heart or cardiomyopathy, further leading to episodes of cardiac failure. The clumping of cells and interference with blood circulation, leading to local failures in blood supply, and again that leading to lung damage, can be an acute form of can lead to crisis or pneumonia. Muscle and joint arthropathies leading to rheumatism. It can lead to even strokes if in up to 10% of cases in children. Gastrointestinal tract damage leading to abdominal pain, and kidney damage leading to kidney failure. And there is a collection of sickle cells in the spleen leading to enlargement and later to fibrosis. So this is all for the sickle cell disease. I have presented in totality, and the next topic will be thalassemia. We'll cover up another important topic in hemolytic, that is another cause for hemolytic anemia. So any question you need to ask, let me know.